Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Tuesday Night Live, a massive show for us tonight, and I'm happy to say that we've got back to our old rig, and we might even have an interloper, but I'll throw it over to Pete. How you going, Peter?
Yeah, go mate, and welcome everybody to the Tuesday Night Live edition of the AFL Crowcast. Great to have you all along with us in this week before the bye, which is the week before the final, so we'll get there eventually, but great to have you all listening. And as Fiend said, just a massive amount to talk about. We've got news around the AFL, so much happening at the moment, and as well as perhaps just a bit of a brief look at last week's game. I don't think we need to look at it too much, but and certainly plenty of talk about the upcoming final against GWS. And just on that, fantastic to see that the tickets sales went so well today. Only 1,100 tickets left at the end of today, and I hear that Balfours have put in a whole lot of orders to restock the apricot slice because everyone will be buying up big and taking it down to Adelaide Oval next Thursday night for that game. So we're looking forward to that. And
how's Port's ticket sales going, Pete?
Well, funnily enough, Fiend, I see that. Well, actually, the statistics were. I'll quickly just introduce Nikki and Macca and Fiend. How are you tonight, guys?
Yeah, good, thanks.
I'll quickly just run through that. The sales left for today were the Adelaide GWS game, 1,100 tickets left. The Sydney Essendon game had a total of 1,750 tickets left. The Richmond Geelong game was sold out, allocation exhausted.
100,000.
And well, it just says that allocation exhausted. I suppose it depends on the MCC members and the AFL members and the like, see who actually turns up in the end. But and then also of course, the Port West Coast game only had the lazy 12,900 tickets left. So ticket sales not going terribly well in that game. Anyway, we'll move on. We have, as I said before, we've got a ton of news to get through and things to get through. So we'll throw it straight over to Nikki for the Nikki's News.
So do I actually have music this time, Fee?
Yes.
And I talked through it, yes.
Yeah.
This is what happens when you don't allow us to listen to the music anymore.
Oh, sorry.
All right. There's some Adelaide Crows news, but we'll leave that till the end. So we'll start with the rest of the stuff. So, of course, the real season now starts, and for a few clubs, the season you would think would be over, but no, they're still dominating the headlines. Collingwood have decided to be kind of interesting and re-sign Buckley for 2 more years. So I think pretty much every other club fan in the AFL was really happy with that decision. Not so sure about Collingwood fans. We do have a couple of injury news in terms of finals. So Selwood is apparently back training, but Geelong have been told that if he actually injures that ligament again, it's likely to do permanent damage, and he may not be able to play for future. Cale Hooker has some bone bruising that they're a little concerned about. And for contract news, Zaharakis has signed on with Essendon. I think it was 4 more years. We've seen also exodus of assistant coaches from Collingwood. So Scott Burns is now going to move to Hawthorn. And the other one, there was another team down the road. I think there were some players signed on, but do we really care?
They care.
They can care. Does anybody else really? I don't know. And the other thing is Lockie Hansen, the unsighted defender at North Melbourne, has been actually told he is not. There's no contract on offer for him at the Kangaroos next season. And apparently the Kangaroos are set to lock in whichever Scott brother it is. Not quite the most punchable face in football, but close to. They're saying he's got another 2-year deal after there was all the murmurings.
Yeah, that takes into 2020.
Yeah, and he's been there for 11 seasons. Now, it was very interesting listening to James Brayshaw tonight, and he made the comment of going, but, everybody's underrated our squad. But for the past couple of years, they've made finals. So does that mean they should be overrating the coach? And I was kind of listening to going, well, maybe you guys were just kind of lucky to make finals?
They only fell in the other day.
Yeah, that was last year, but they played in some prelim finals before that, so you wouldn't.
But Pete, they've been on a downward slide since then, and they've gone even further on a downward slide, and they've been throwing big money at trying to attract contracted players and never been able to land one.
Yeah, the biggest problem for them, Nikki, though, is that they had an ageing list, and they didn't replace the ageing list in time, and of course they're doing it now. And the people, the lads they're putting there aren't even really ready to play because they're not being put amongst a whole heap of good players to learn the game amongst those players. So then that's the reason why they just go crash down to the bottom.
I think they made a fatal list management mistake, and I've seen us do it over the years as well. And that's they got to a couple of prelim finals and thought, we just need a couple of missing pieces of the puzzle. And so they went and spent up big on some fairly high-priced free agents like Nick Del Santo and I think Jared Waite was a free agency. They picked up Higgins. And so they did go for some experienced guys to beef up their list. And, of course, it didn't work. And I can remember that I can remember us doing that in years gone by when we thought we just needed missing pieces of the puzzle. When really, if your squad's not good enough to get past the prelim final, then you have to look at the real structure of your list and how to take it forward. You're not just going to be able to top up on one or two players, I don't think. But anyway, they have bitten the bullet, I think, and will be out of finals contention for a few years. I just want to go back to, just really quickly, Nathan Buckley. That was a really big story, and I guess because he's had really no success. I just wonder, that club was very successful and subject to that transition arrangement which Eddie Maguire brokered. Is Nathan Buckley or is he now attached to Eddie Maguire in terms of success? And so basically, if Buckley goes, Eddie has to go. And really, is Eddie conflicted in being involved with that appointment in any way, shape, or form?
Yeah, well, I've heard some of the Victorian experts discussing that very point that you're talking about there, Pete, and the comments were very similar to what yours were, that Eddie is, really they're saying it's Eddie that's virtually convinced people to reappoint Buckley, and therefore by doing that he's tied his apron strings onto Buckley's apron strings, and if one fails, so will the other. So if Buckley has to go, they say Eddie will too.
Interesting too, that review seemed to highlight some dysfunction within their footy department, or the connection between their footy department and their admin. So they've blamed everyone else but the coach and the pres, and the CEO was the scapegoat. And I tell you what, I reckon if they're not pushing finals by mid next year, the drums will start beating again for Buckley, I reckon. And like you say, Pete, by association, Eddie as well, I think.
Yeah, and the other thing too is the list management side of Collingwood seems to think that if you have a team full of midfielders, you'll win the game, because they've neglected the back end and the front end quite severely, and at the expense of getting a whole heap of midfielders. So I would say that it isn't just Buckley. The list management people really need to kick up the arse and replacing, I would think.
Yeah, that's where they've had some absolutely shocking decisions go on there.
And that's including our past recruiting manager, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
And the other thing I would like to say is that they're saying that Collingwood is the favourite to get Lever, and I would say that with events that have happened today, and I won't steal your thunder, Nicky, it looks like Lever might well be leaving the club. And if he does go to Collingwood, is he just selling his soul for dollars? Because given the fact that they're going to have the same coach for the next 2 years, and he's failed, in fact, he's taken the club downwards each year successively for the last 4 years, it seems to be a long bow to see them going right to the top.
I think most people have predicted that they're not going to rise. I mean, they do have some nice talent there, but their ball movement, etc., has just been shocking.
And my point being that if you're going to be leaving, you're going to leave Adelaide, which is a team that's on the rise and will play premierships. Surely you want to go to one that has got that's offering you, if it's for money, the money, but also got a very good chance of playing in finals.
Well, they can be mutually. Sorry, Fane. They can be mutually exclusive in the sense that, he's the reason that some of a club like Collingwood or Melbourne have got plenty of cap to give him that money is because they're not bulging at the seams with a premiership squad.
Don't rule out Hawthorn.
Oh, you'd never rule out Hawthorn or anything like this. They'd be always a chance.
Yeah, they're always in the background being sneaky. Just a couple of other quick things is that the new stadium deal in Perth, I think Freo has come to agreements with there, but West Coast has been holding out. It was interesting that they both, unlike what happened with our deal, where it was both clubs were together, they're actually doing their deals separately. So hopefully that West Coast one gets sorted out soon. And on the AFLW, because we do have the State of Origin, which is going to happen on Saturday night, the Allies coached by Beck Goddard and, of course, captained by our own Chelsea Randall. The AFL Commission actually met today. They were going to make a decision on the new possible licences for 2019. They have actually deferred that until later. So that we thought we were going to have a decision on new teams and how many there were going to be in the 2019 season. But once again, that's been pushed back. We don't quite know why. Now, good news. So the All-Australian squad was announced, and it will be the final 22 will be named tomorrow night, but we got 8 players named in the squad. It wasn't the record. We did go back and check, so I think it was, I can't remember the exact year, but one year Geelong actually had 9 players in the All-Australian team itself. I think it was a year where they didn't name a squad, they just named the team, and Geelong got 9 players in there. But
was that the 119 year?
I think that might have been.
Oh, very nice.
Nicely done.
Very nicely played.
There were some interesting selections within the squad. Still not quite sure how Tom Jonas got in there. I know he's had a really good, consistent year, but yeah, I think there is the fact that Bontempelli from the Bulldogs got in, but McRae didn't. I think that should have actually been a swap, and that probably might have seen Jonas miss out.
I think to be fair, Tom Jonas has had a pretty good year, and there isn't. I mean, I guess he's a light for light for Rampy, but Rampy missed the first 6 or 7 games.
Yeah.
So if Rampy had a full year, he probably gets that spot. But I think to be fair, certainly from what I've seen, Tom Jonas has had a pretty good year, and he's certainly been talked up by over the board, which is generally an indication that they've had, double better year than anybody over there if he's actually reached their pages.
Yeah, I think he's deserved his spot in the squad. But if there's any, but one of the rumours that are going around is that in the final 22 that Ryder's got the ruck position over Jacob. Now, if that is true, I'm very annoyed about that. Not that
he wins most of the stats over Jacobs.
But they're heads to head. Jacobs has beaten him.
Yeah, but they most of the time they actually just go on the stats. That's what they look at. They get all the stuff from Champion Data, and that's what they go on, and that's how they justify their positioning. And Ryder, to be fair, has actually won most of those stats this year. Whereas Jacobs doesn't even make... I don't think he's number one in any of those measurements.
No, he's not. I saw the stats on that the other week, and he actually ranks, in terms of stats, he ranks quite a bit lower than in virtually every single category than every other ruckman.
Yeah, I actually think Cruiser should be the ruckman. He's had an outstanding year.
I was going to say Cruiser as well. I thought that, but he has tailed off a bit. Does anyone agree with me that Rory Sloane is a touch lucky to be in the squad?
No.
I think he is lucky because he had that period of maybe 4 or 5 games in the middle where he was quite terrible.
No, he's done enough. I believe he's had a lot of good games. Well, he's either a touch unlucky, he's either a touch lucky, or you're definitely against him being in there. I mean, what's it to be? Is it an argument, or is it just a 50-50?
Well, I don't think he should be in there, to be honest with you. I think that he started off really well, obviously, and then had a lot of trouble with the tag for a good third of the year, and he's come good of late, which is excellent. But I don't know whether he's put together a body of work this year in the All-Australian squad.
But the thing is, with Sloaney is that when he, yes, he's had some quiet games, no question. But when he's on, it's a 3-vote performance. It's the best on ground. So if you actually go, if you go through a lot of his games, he's probably going to, he's probably best on ground for a lot of them. He'll still poll really well on the Brownlow. So he's had yes, he's had some off games, but he's had a lot of very, very, very good games, which I think overcomes that. The one that had me curious was on radio tonight. The ubiquitous Kane Corns was rambling on about the fact that Robbie Gray should have had the small forward spot ahead of Eddie Betts.
I'd agree with that.
Oh, come on. Robbie Gray
no.
doesn't even play most of his football in the forward line.
Oh, come on. Yes, he does.
Most of his, but he plays, what, 50-50?
No, not this year he hasn't, because they've played him quite a bit up forward and probably chucked him in the middle only when they've been going shit. But Robbie Gray is, if you're gonna apply the same criteria or analysis to Sloane as you do to Sloane, then I think Robbie Gray overall has been the more dangerous small forward over the course of the season. Betts again, second half of the year he's only been fair to middling, and whereas I think Gray has had some really standout performances, and I'd have Gray in over Betts this year.
Toss of the coin, though, I reckon, Phoenix, and I think that some people see it one way and some people see it another, because I think there isn't much in it.
So who do we think our chances are from our squad actually getting in the final squad?
Sloaney will get in, I would think, and I think Eddie will get in, and I think Laird will get in, and actually the one that I reckon Luke Brown's been the better small defender on our side than Laird. I think his continual kicks that go 50 metres in the air and 20 metres forward start to get a bit irritating. But he gets a lot of the ball, and I think that it's almost sort of overflow from last year as well. So they're the three. But out of the three, I think that Laird would be the luckiest.
It's very interesting, though, on that, because we think Laird hasn't been as effective with his disposals. And, I mean, we've been quite ragged on him, that he's not as good as he has been, particularly towards the end of the year. And yet, weirdly enough, Tom Mitchell is the number-ranked player for effective disposals in the AFL. Second is Matt Crouch, and third is Rory Laird.
Yeah, but Laird, gives a lot of little bloody dish-offs and all that sort of stuff. The knock on Laird is when he actually's got to hit a target down the field. He's all right when he's dishing off, but when he's actually got to be constructive, he's been a little bit hit and miss this year.
Yeah, he's still, I think, a little bit harsh because you're judging him by his own high standards, I think, because I thought last year he was immaculate with his disposal. Not quite as good this year, but if you still look at the percentages, I think it's still a very effective disposal overall.
What about Tex? Any room for Tex in the team?
No, I don't think so.
There won't be. I mean, you'd love to see it.
Not the way they pick it.
But he won't be. No, he won't be in.
I think the ones that we will definitely get in from us will be Eddie. Eddie will definitely get in. I reckon Lairdy will definitely get in. And now that he's actually in the squad, Sloane may well get in.
I think Sloaney will be on the bench. I think Eddie will be in, and I think Laird will be in, because they do, and we've seen them do it before. They like to have they'll put them in 1 year for the squad, and then they'll pick them the following year. Sometimes even if the previous year they were better,
yeah, it's true.
They want to see some continuity. So I think he'll be in for that. I think you're spot on, Pete, that Luke Brown needs to be in there. If you look at the defenders that they've picked, they're not lockdown defenders. So even though Rampy missed those 6 games, he has been pretty much one of the best lockdown defenders since that point. And you ask any of the small forwards in the AFL probably who their most difficult opponent is, and they're going to say Luke Brown. We know that Hayden Ballantyne's already named him as such. But because he's not flashy, because he doesn't do that run-on, that's what they want to see. They want to see those attacking-type players. They're not actually picking the squad, even though they say they are, to play an actual game. If they were, then Tex would be at centre-half forward and he would be the captain.
You're right about Brownie, though. He is an absolute clamp. I think he would be one of the hardest players in the whole competition to stand on and try and get a kick. So you're right, Nicky, but there isn't anything flash about his game. There isn't. In fact, our own supporters don't notice him half the time. And he's doing a fantastic job. One we forgot to mention, who I think has to be in, is Matty Crouch.
I think they're going to go Tom Mitchell beforehand, and all I'm basing that on is the fact that they've got him as the head as on the Foxtel ads for advertising the All Australian team. He is actually the first player they show.
Mitchell will be in there. There's no doubt about that. But why would that exclude Matty Crouch?
Because you've got to get Danger and Selwood in. They'll want to get Sloaney in. They'll probably want to try and get Bontempelli in. You've got to have Merritt in there somewhere.
I don't think Bontempelli gets in over Matt Crouch, to be honest.
He shouldn't, but they like him.
The problem is that you've got to allow at least one full season of outstanding football for a player from an interstate team to be noticed by the Victorian media. Then once they're noticed by the Victorian media, that can then last for 2 to 3 years. And
that's when the go home rumours start as well.
Really? I've noticed that Matt Crouch has just started in the last few weeks to really get some attention in the Vic media, and so it's too late now for him for this year, but that will now carry over into next year, and so provided he has a reasonable season next year, he'd be almost a lock.
I wonder though, because about that, Pete, I think he's a sneaky chance. Because one of those voices who's been talking the loudest about how underrated he is by everybody else is Cameron Lang, who is one of the selectors.
That's true.
Now, the fact that he's been on the front foot and absolutely spruiking about his disposal, and even though they're shorter kicks and everything else, but how damaging he has been because of that, I think he might be a sneaky chance just because of Ling and what he's been saying.
Who cares anyway? It's only a bloody make-believe team. Let's talk about the real stuff.
Well, we'll start with the bad news, in that we got the curse of the appendicitis for the second time this year, but luckily it appears it hasn't burst. So Rory Sloane has gone to hospital. He's had it taken out. By reports, it was keyhole surgery, and because it hadn't burst, they got it as soon as he started feeling the symptoms, that he is actually still a chance to play, even with a 9-day break. And if anybody's in the AFL is going to have the toughness to be able to do that, it is Sloane.
Well, Peter Larkins on 5AA said in his opinion he thought he was a certainty to play because he didn't have his appendix didn't burst, therefore there's no peritonitis to worry about. And he said that really on the inside of his body, all that's really happened is they removed an appendix and there'll be one stitch inside, and then there's three keyhole entries where there's a stitch or two there. And he said, and that's it. And he said, no, really, he said in 5 or 6 days he should be feeling pretty good. So his opinion is that he'll be playing.
The one downside to that, though, Macca, is he's not his actual doctor and he's just taken a guess.
Yeah, but you're quite right. But if he didn't have a burst appendix, so all the rest of it should follow on from there. Unlike Eddie's, who did have a burst appendix.
And then there was the good news, which our episode is very aptly titled about. So Mitch McGovern will be a Crow for another 3 years.
That in itself, of course, is like a flag, isn't it? It's really good, and it's something great for the club, and they've obviously chosen right now to, it's a good thing leading into the finals. And it has done, but to me, it's also got the reverse effect of, to me, saying, well, that's lever out the door.
Well, I'm not so sure about that, because it was very interesting. You had Andrew Fagan yesterday, when coming back from Western Australia, was asked about whether we would see any signings, and he was just straight back, nope, we're just concentrating on finals. Nope, we're just concentrating on finals. The whole thing, nope, we're just concentrating on finals. And a lot of people took that going, oh, we're not going to hear anything. And then lo and behold, next day, Mitch McGovin signed on for 3 years. Now, whether that was a calculated release because we had some bad news or not, which we know our club likes to do, but the fact that you had Fagan giving that straight back, and then the very next day, here's a signing that we said wasn't going to be done.
I think you'd have to be 90% certain that Lever's gone now, because I reckon that if Lever was done, they would have announced them both. And usually, there's a lot of Victorian jungle drums.
No, that was okay.
Jungle drums beating, and where there's smoke, there's fire. Whereas things kind of dried up with the McGovin rumours about 4 or 5 weeks ago, and at that stage it looked more likely that he was going to stay. So Lever's out the door, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think you summed it up well, in the sense that with McGovin, nobody was saying anything about him leaving in the last 2 weeks, whereas the reverse holds with Lever. It's intensified in the last 2 weeks, if anything.
I think it just boils down to now as to. I agree. I think that he's gone, and that's fine. It really boils down to how we play this now, and I think that as a supporter base, we've been through so much angst over the years with players leaving. I don't think this is going to hit the supporter base in any way, other than if we're not aggressive and strong at the trade table. I think that will have a backlash on the club, and so I think that what we need to look at is to look forward and say, okay, this happens. Players leave. And what can we get at the trade table? That's what I think. I think that's what the general. It's. I have to say, it's not my personal opinion, but I think that's what the general public feeling will be, and that is let's see what we can get at the trade table for him.
Well, that has to be it, doesn't it? And we have to get. To me, he's obviously. Well, I'd say he's worth a first and second rounder.
You're not going to get full value, though, because he's out of contract, so he's definitely worth, I think, a first and a reasonable player, or a first and a second. But I think we'll be getting a first round pick and maybe some steak knives, but I don't think we'll get market value, because at the end of the day, he's out of contract. The only thing that's going to pump that up a little bit is if Melbourne and Collingwood get into a bit of a bidding war.
Yeah, I just hope we don't. If we do get into the business of first round and a player, we don't take on another Dean Gore, for God's sake.
Personally, I've had a gutful of losing the club losing players like this, and I just don't know. I just don't know how when we're on the brink of success, that we still can't keep a side together, particularly with a key player like that. As a first round draft pick just 3 years ago. I just really it really just escapes me as to how this can happen. But anyway, it does.
It's quite simple, Pete.
No, because... I don't. And if you're going to give me the it's simple because someone offered him more money.
No, it's the way those players coming through the system now have been looking, and you can see how much they idolise the American system. And those players swap for money, and they go for money all the time. That's their very nature, and that's what they actually look at as their sporting idols. Not like we did growing up, where you knew somebody was going to die for that jumper. You wanted to be a one-club player. These players are not like that anymore.
That is near that is, and I generally 90% of the time respect what you're saying, Nicky, but that is close to the biggest load of bunkum I've ever heard you put up on this podcast.
Bunkum.
That's a new one.
And if it had been Phoenix, if it had been you or bloody Macro, I would have said the biggest load of bullshit.
Right.
Because it was Nicky, I've trimmed it back to bunkum.
Bunkum. Yeah.
No, I'm happy with bullshit.
You know, and the reason is because players all over the bloody league are getting offered lots of money. And there is a lot of loyalty in the AFL, and just because we have a player that leaves for money, as Tippett did years ago, as Davis did, as Bock did, you know, all of it. You know, why is it that it's only Adelaide players that seem to get tempted by the money?
Well,
you know, there is. Sorry, Fiend. I'll just one last point, and then I'll throw to you. But why is it that, you know, we see you know. What the Americans would refer to as franchise players continually choose to stay at their clubs and disregard big money offers? It's a rarity. It's a rarity to see big name players change clubs in the overall scheme of it. Yet for us, it's regular.
Here's my take, Pete. We got stung really badly with the GWS and Gold Coast situations, and we lost Bock and, you know, a couple of others, Davis, etc., etc. But aside from that, we've only lost mercenaries. We've lost Tippett, who was a mercenary. We've lost Danger, who was a mercenary, and it looks like we're going to lose Lever, who was a mercenary, and Gunston, who was a mercenary. Now, the situation is that we're recruiting from a talent pool that has 70% Victorians, and Victoria has 70% of the teams in the AFL. So you're talking about 10 teams in one state that happens to be the home state of 70% of the talent pool. And at any given time, one or two or even three of those clubs are going to be in a position financially to chuck a bucket of money at somebody. And it's not just us. Brisbane went through it as well. And, you know, GWS have gone through it. Although they could afford to do it, it didn't really hurt them. But I don't think you can blame the club for losing mercenary players back to a home state where teams are going to pay overs. If you look at what all these players have been paid, aside from Danger, who had the obvious Geelong Mafia that's going to look after him for the rest of his life, they've all been offered ridiculous amounts of money. The rumours about what Lever's been offered is ridiculous for a halfback flanker. I don't care how good he is. And the kid is going to take it because he's already done his knee once. He's been offered a Godfather deal back in his home state. We don't have the same opportunities as a two-team state to attract the same amount of players because there's not that many South Australian players in the system. And secondly, between Port and us, it's not an interchangeable cycle. So it's not often that we have, you know, quote unquote war chest to be able to attract these players. But there's always going to be one or two Victorian clubs that have a war chest that are able to attract, you know, these players. So I don't know what you can do about it.
How many? These are all those players you mentioned are all top 10 players.
Yep.
Save for maybe Gunston, who would have become a top 10 player because he was only a junior player. How many top 10 players has Sydney lost?
Tom Mitchell, Mumford.
Yeah, Mumford's a big loss.
Mumford, no, they got rid of Mumford because they couldn't afford him.
They got rid of him. They couldn't get him in. And he went to
Tippett.
GWS. He didn't go back to Victoria.
No, but they had to ditch him because they had to fit Tippett in, which was, in the end, probably not a wise move. But, I mean, the thing of it is, Pete, is you're on a hiding to nothing. And when you listen to someone like McGovern talk about club culture, and when you look at the players that we have kept that are top-tier Victorians, like your Rory Sloanes and your Daniel Talias, you can't be selective in how you view the club. If some players are saying the culture is fantastic and other players are leaving for big money offers, then the only thing that you can say is that it's all about the money. And it's very easy for a Victorian kid who is all about the money to move back to Victoria because there's always going to be a club that's willing to pay for it.
Yeah, I think what you said is very accurate. But I want to throw in another factor, and that's Reid as the list manager. I've got no faith in that guy at all. To me, why would you leave a player of Lever's calibre? And he showed last year that he had talent. Why would you let him go into this year to negotiate that contract?
I agree.
Why he should have been stitched up last year, and he would have signed last year because at that stage he didn't have the.
Who's to say we didn't try that? And he went, "No, I'm going to wait for the new CBA," and refuse. You can't force a player to sign if they're not interested in actually starting negotiations.
Nicky, you're throwing that in just as a hoopla because if there'd been any talk of it, if there had been any offer, there would have been talk of it, and there's been no talk of it. And I don't think we've made any offer to him until this year, and that's too late.
I think you're on the money, Macca, and it's the one part of our list management I think that needs to change. I think we need to be far more aggressive in extending these players, particularly the at-risk players. And we need to be a lot more hard-nosed about it, and we need to be prepared to lose a Jake Lever if they won't. I mean, you know, we could have traded Danger the year before he went on to restricted free agency and got something better for him. We could have done the same with Lever. We could have put him on the trade table and got something for him. I know that the only leverage that we have in these situations is a signed contract. If you're going to the trade table with an unsigned player, you have no leverage. And what we need to try and do is work a situation where we're far more aggressive with extensions. You know, we managed to get Sloan on an extension, Talia's on an extension, you know, one or two others
we didn't
as
get
well.
Sloan hasn't signed his extension.
Yes, he has.
I think you find he hasn't.
When did
it was
we
reported that he was going to, but then that all went quiet.
Yeah, but his previous contract, we signed him on an extension.
So this would be his second extension on his
extension. He didn't get to his last year of his contract.
Right, sorry, I thought you were referring to the situation this year where Walker extended.
Well, Walker actually renegotiated.
Renegotiated, and Sloan was going to do the same thing, and that went quiet. Yeah,
but is Sloaney up in 2018? Is he?
Yep.
Yep. Well, then I'd be on his hammer.
We should be signing him now, not then.
Yep. I mean, we staved off.
I think that was our intention, but it hasn't happened. So read what you may into that.
We staved off a pretty big offer from St Kilda for Sloan back at his last contract. And I just feel like the only leverage that we have is a contract, and we need to be more aggressive about signing these players on deals before either we use longer terms so that we have more leverage. Because there's, like, for example, if we decide we want to get rid of JJ, you know, he's still got 3 years on his contract to go, so it gives us some leverage rather than, you know, putting him on a 2-year deal and having him walk. So how
about trading in? How about questionable trades like getting in players like what do you reckon the combined worth would be of Menzel, Hampton, and Season? What do you reckon? And bear in mind they've been pretty much running around the SNFL or injured for the last 2 years. Cost us a second rounder each. What do you reckon they'd be on? And then throw McHatin to that. What do you reckon that 4 would be on?
Too much.
Way too much.
They pay him,
and then you wonder why there isn't the money to pay Lever.
Well, I don't think I don't think it's about the money to pay Lever. I think no one in their right mind would pay Lever $850,000 a year, and Melbourne are prepared to do it. But why should we pay $850,000 a year for a bloody intercept halfback flanker who's already done an ACL?
Well, why should we have what do you reckon? At least $1 million running around in the sample?
Well, they're two different things, Pete. Because whether you've got one, on the one hand, you're probably right that we do overpay, and you know, someone like a David McKay, yes, absolutely. I don't know, I couldn't guess what the other three are on, but that still doesn't equate to paying Lever more money. If Adelaide paid Lever $850,000 a year, that'd be ridiculous.
Yeah, no way. No, thank
reports you. If reports are to be believed, the fact is that we're not even close. So if someone's offering $850 and we're offering $500, I mean, would he stay for 700? And can we not match that because we've gone out and we've spent money on, let alone what they cost us in trade, second rounders for that 3. Jesus. I was vocally against that when it happened, and I was howled down. But that's turned out to be an absolute. I mean, you might get a final series out of Seedsman, but that's really about it.
Oh no, I don't agree with that.
What, you reckon those 3 were good trades?
The Hampton
second rounders for those 3.
Hampton was a good trade, I think.
Righto.
I've got no problem with the Hampton or even the Seedsman trade, but the other one was just bloody hopeless. But and we've been a bit unlucky with injury with both Hampton and Seedsman. So, but I don't think they come into the equation. The equation isn't do we have the money in the bin. The equation is how much are we prepared to take out of that bin and to pay lever. And Phoenix has pointed about like a half-back flanker. No matter how good he is, you can only pay him a certain amount of money. And for example, you can't have your best players in your side getting say 650, 700,000 or whatever they get, and then paying a half-back flanker 850,000. We just can't do that. And
that'd put him on more than Tex.
Yeah, and apparently what has happened is that we've upped our offer several times, and the last time we went up again, and apparently what Lever's crew have come back is make it another 100 and he'll stay, and we won't do it.
And it's not only about what we're paying other players, Pete, it's about what we can potentially pay a recruit coming in. I mean, who's to say that we haven't put some offers in front of some bigger names or some names to come over from Victoria or other states? I mean, irrespective of how well we've gone this year, I don't think anyone could deny that we could do with another silky inside-out midfielder. Who's to say that we're not keeping our options open in that regard, or that we haven't already made a play for one of these players?
The big fish, often talked about and seldom seen.
It doesn't need to be a big fish. It can be a medium fish, Pete. But to get to like
a medium fish for us would be a big fish.
No, but Pete, you're being a bit pessimistic, because if you're going to attract decent, let's use someone like De Goey from Collingwood, for example, who's got a bit of potential, can run through the midfield. To get him to, if you wanted him to get him to come from Victoria to Adelaide, you're going to have to pay him over market value. But the positive side of that is, if you do get a Victorian kid to come over to South Australia to play, he's likely to stay here for the rest of his career. There's less go-home risk if you recruit a Victorian mid-career than at the beginning of his career. And I wouldn't mind, say for example, Lever was playing for Melbourne right now, and for whatever reason we wanted to get him over to Adelaide if he was a key defender or whatever. I wouldn't mind the reverse happening and we pay more, because he's already into his career. And as I said, the go-home factor or the go-home risk with someone coming over here mid-career is far, far less. Patrick Ryder is not going to leave Port Adelaide. He's here for the rest of his career now.
Yeah, that's a very good point you raise. And from the Victorian point of view, taking Lever off of us, they don't have to go through any development stages, etc., etc. All they have to do is put the thick icing on top of the cake just to lure him across there.
Yeah, but who do we lure over that's quality, that's partway through their career? I mean, the kind of Victorians that come over are guys like Tom Lynch, who's made a great career over here, but that was because he couldn't get a game at St Kilda. They're the guys that we managed to shovel up and get them over here in a good development program. But who else would there be?
Well, there'd be plenty, but it's, a question without notice. If you want, I can compile a list.
No, it's okay. I just think that we do. I mean, look at, if you want to mention, if you're going to bring up Ryder and mention Port Adelaide, well, who do they have that go home? Very, very few. And we can bang on about the fact they overpay their players or whatever. They still don't end up with people with the go home factor. I mean, look at Travis Boak.
Yeah, but
if anyone wanted to go home, it was Travis Boak.
Yeah,
he had. Look, what about his personal circumstances? And he still put that aside He was in a worse position than Dangerfield
Pete,
in
that's
terms of
one
the pull to go home.
Pete, that's one player, and you and I both know that you could put Mitch McGovin in a very similar situation. So put one player up as an example it's too small a data set.
Robbie Gray is another one.
But as you pointed out before, they overpay their top tier players, and as a consequence, where's their depth? You know, all due respect to Mac19 lurking in our little chat here. My opinion is that Port's list management is very lopsided, and because their top players so much, their depth is just terrible. So you've got to have a balance between retaining good depth, and you know we do have Hampton and Menzel and Seasman. You know, Hampton and Seasman, if we lost players, could walk into our team during finals and we wouldn't lose too much. In fact, Seasman probably deserves a crack next week. So having that level of depth is pretty handy, and I don't think you could say the same about Port Adelaide in terms of the amount of depth that they have.
Yeah, then that becomes secular, because then you know, yes, we're paying so much money for decent depth that we haven't got enough money to pay Lever.
But we don't want to pay Lever that much. That's the thing.
That much. Yeah, I'm with Phoenix on this. Do we really need to overpay him so much, which means we may start to lose that depth?
Anyway, it's 10 minutes to go. We've lost 20 or 30 minutes there. I'm sorry, everybody. I intended to talk about other stuff as well, but it just frustrates the shit out of me that we cannot keep players. We have
kept players. We just kept one today.
We have more top 10 players that walk out than any other club, and that's just a fact.
No, it's ridiculous, Pete, to say that. We've had one.
What do you mean? How do you? What, you're saying Tippett wasn't a top 10 player when he walked?
Oh, I wouldn't have thought so.
Oh my goodness me! So why did we compromise our whole club in an effort to keep him?
Well, we didn't.
Why did our administration go to that extent to keep him if he wasn't?
Because we had no bloody forwards at that stage, and then we brought in Josh Jenkins as insurance.
Doesn't that then instantly make him if he's our only key forward, and he was a key forward that was kicking 50 goals a year? You're saying he's not a top 10 player? That's as ridiculous as any argument I've heard tonight.
But it's not, Pete, because you're talking about a bloke who was not going to stay. It's the same as Dangerfield. He was not going to stay. You could have given Danger another $500,000 a year, and he was not going to stay.
Yeah, sadly, that's true.
Anyway,
you can't judge the club on that.
I can judge the club against the Sydney Swans.
Are you factoring in their cola?
Yeah, with their cola and the fact they've got an academy, so they're able to actually
that's
draft those players from there.
That's just money. But then when it comes to Adelaide, well, we were never going to keep them anyway, no matter what we were going to do.
But we don't have that money. We don't have that money.
What you just said to me is Dangerfield was going to leave regardless of the money, and Tippett was going to leave regardless of the money. So the money shouldn't factor in.
And Lever's going to leave because of the money. And if we had cola and could afford to chuck him an extra 200,000, he probably wouldn't.
Well, that's true. And the one thing, Pete, we do have to face is the fact that we're in a unique situation compared to the 10 Victorian clubs, because as Phoenix pointed out, the majority of the players come from Victoria, and therefore the players that come from Victoria and in their team aren't going to come to South Australia, and unless we paid an outrageous figure, then they're still very unlikely to come, the type of player that you're talking about. Whereas the reverse doesn't hold, because we've got a player that's home is in Victoria, and they're getting offered a heap more money to go home. So we're in a unique situation that we're of a handicap that they don't have.
I'm not going to burn the ears of the listeners any longer on this, and I think what I'm going to do though is over the next week I'm going to do some research, because I reckon we've comfortably lost more top 10 players than any of West Coast, Fremantle or Sydney. particularly in terms of Victorian players. And for some reason, what I can't compare to other clubs.
You can't compare to West Coast and Fremantle.
Or Fremantle, because that is so far away.
And I can't compare to Port. So we're just what
you
an
can
island
compare
club.
to Port.
Yeah, compare to Port.
Well, okay, so let's compare to Port. Who have they got that has gone home?
Well, you're going to do the list.
Well, I can tell off the top of my head, there's no one.
Well, Nathan Cracker left, didn't he?
Jacobs, what was his name? Ben Jacobs? Geez, he was a loss.
Did Nathan Cracker leave?
He came back.
No, that's not the point.
Was he a top 10 player?
Well, Gold Coast seemed to think so.
Top 1,000.
Anyway, all right. You've got one. That's good. That's a good start.
And
now,
when was the last time they contended?
Sorry?
When was the last time they contended?
I'm talking about players lost, Fiend. I'm talking about players who walk out the door.
Yeah, but when the quality's not there, then they're not gonna get any suitors, are they?
No, I agree with Phoenix. Our problem is we generate players with a very good development program. We generate a lot of good players.
Well, I've heard many wonderful and varied excuses as to why we can't retain players tonight. And
Pete, we have retained players.
Yes.
That's what you're ignoring.
Forgets.
We have retained players. We just signed a Western Australian whose brother plays for West Coast, who had many good reasons, as you well know, to go back home. We just signed him for another 3 years, and yet you haven't mentioned that once. You're focusing on a guy who is obviously looking for money, and who we're refusing to match because he doesn't play a key role in our team. And not only that, I would rather we get the picks for him than to overpay him by $200,000. So you got to balance it. You got to balance it. We staved off St Kilda's massive offer to Sloaney a couple of years ago. We're batting 500, mate, and that's not bad considering our market position.
I respectfully disagree in terms of our efforts to retain players. We retain some players. I just don't think we retain enough, and this happens year in, year out. That we lose players.
How would we have
drives me to distraction?
How would we have kept Danger?
Moved to Geelong.
How did Port keep Boak?
No. I'm just.
No. You asked me how we keep Danger. I asked you how did Port keep Boak?
Well, probably.
When his father had just died.
Yep.
His mother was a widow.
Yep.
His sister was begging him to come home.
Yeah, and his mother told him to stay.
And yeah, fine. So how did they keep Boak and we lost Dangerfield?
Well, you know the answer to that.
No, you tell me.
Well, Danger's ties with family in Geelong, for starters. Danger's partner's ties with family in Geelong, for another thing. The fact that Dangerfield clearly is more driven and motivated to participate in the media, which he couldn't do over here. I mean, there's 3 reasons off the top of my head. Plus,
he's very much an egomaniac, and he's the king of the heap over there. And,
I mean, they're entirely different people.
In a much bigger market than he was here. And I mean, AFL, their publications, it's always got bloody Dangerfield on the front of them, for God's sake.
So, I mean, you haven't answered the question. How do you feel we would have been able to keep Dangerfield?
Well, I think that this should have been dealt with. You know, there should be dealt with years ago to have some better list management principles in place, and I referred to the money that's being spent on lower tier players. That's certainly something that they could look at.
But it wasn't a money situation for Danger.
You know, sorry. Well, it was. Well, there was.
He only took $650 over there. He took $650 over there to go over there.
Oh yeah, but he had a whole lot. There was a whole lot attached to that as well.
Exactly my
point.
He's
only on $650 as well. Well, why can't we do that?
Because we don't have the media outlets here.
Well, we do. We do have media outlets here.
No, we
not
don't.
The ones he wanted.
Come on. Croc Media aren't going to give... Croc Media's SA Footy isn't going to give Dangerfield the exposure that he wants 24/7.
Well, all I can say, Vate, is that I'm not privy to the innermost workings of the football club, and I can't tell you why we did not keep Dangerfield. But what I can tell you is that our neighbours across the road, with their most senior player in almost exactly the same boat, were able to do it.
Nothing like the same boat.
Nothing like the same boat.
It was
I'm with
very,
Phoenix on
very
this.
similar. Very similar boat.
No, it wasn't.
No.
Not at all. Not at all.
Yeah, it was. It was.
No.
It was almost the same bloody town.
No, because, it's the same town. But you've actually answered that in the fact that we said, okay, so for Boak, he wanted to come home, his sister, but his mother told him to stay at port, and he listened to his mother. Whereas Dangerfield had his whole family, and he's got a shitload of cousins. I mean, what is it, like 38 of them or something in bloody Moggs Creek? All
50, over 50.
Yeah, all going, come home. Come home. And then he had Costa going, come home, we'll look after your family. You've got his partner, whose father used to be the mayor of Geelong, who has all those other things. They wanted her home because she wanted to start a family. She wanted to be near her family back in Geelong. They are not the same thing at all, Pete. You've actually answered that.
They are very close to the same thing.
Who did Boak have?
They're very close to the same thing.
Did Boak have
and if you can't
the
see
mayor's
it,
daughter
all you're doing is putting your head in the sand.
No, Pete, you're just running an agenda.
You are.
If you cannot recognise that Port did a better job of keeping hold of Boak than obviously we did of Dangerfield.
Yeah.
Well, I go back to, I think where we have to get better at keeping them, Pete, is to when we recognise, and when we've got first people inside our club, when we recognise that there is a player that's going to become an exceptional player, sign them up to a long-term contract before they actually get to the stage where all this big money comes being offered to them.
Agree.
Right, it's 10 o'clock. Shall we leave that topic to the side for the moment?
Yeah.
And we might have time to squeeze in the Cockwomble Award.
No, we're going further than that, Pete.
Yeah,
if you need to turn into a
I don't
pumpkin,
need to go. No, we'll push on.
Hey!
no. Let's talk.
Can I just say
Yeah.
that Pete had actually just turned into, for that last half an hour discussion, he turned into the Big Footy Adelaide board. Where something positive, and he's turned it into an absolute disaster and we're useless. And it started with something positive. Well done, Pete.
Thank you very much.
Now, what else we got to talk about?
Oh, there was a game we didn't really care about on Sunday.
Well, yeah, I got to say I moderated my opinion. I was very angry after
Oh,
the
you've
game.
moderated now, Macca. God, we could have another 20 minutes on this now.
Well, I'm a very emotional type about football, and they did give you the shits the way they played, and I was disappointed with a lot of things though, because I thought we lost our structure during the game, and that really annoyed me. But then again, of course, no Walker to create the structure, and
Yeah, we left half of them at home, mate.
I know. Well, I know it's only one player, but
Two, Talia.
No, I'm talking about in the forward line, and our forward line's totally lost its structure because with the absence of Walker, and when you look at that, and also I had another look at Hardigan's effort, and he had a couple of lobotomy moments early, but I've got to say his overall game was very good. He surprised me.
So what we've learnt, Nicky, is that it just takes Macca a little bit longer to analyse the game.
Just a little bit for him to come around to our way of thinking.
No. What you've learned is, not being Dutch like Felix is, I can actually change my mind and acknowledge if I had it wrong in the first place.
Hey, I've acknowledged my change of minds heaps of times because I thought we were going to be shit this year. Hey, Pete, what did you reckon about the weekend? What did you think about the performance, Pete?
Oh, look, I was pretty relaxed about it. I mean, I watched the game, and I think that for me, it was indicative, of where we were at in the first quarter when you looked at the tackle count. I think we were at something like 2 or 3 tackles for the whole quarter.
Yeah,
terrible.
When you come out and that just seemed to me that they weren't switched on, and I heard some really silly comments. I'm trying to think of the media outlet now that I heard it from. Someone was babbling on about that, that Adelaide were up the fight. Don't you worry about that. They were, this was an amazing performance by West Coast. It was probably Robbo, I think, saying, they were, don't think that Adelaide weren't trying. They were, I mean, it's a total bullshit. I mean, when we go out and lay that many tackles in the first quarter, there's no way in the world we're switched on. No way.
No.
And so from quarter time onwards, it was just really, in our house, it was just a matter of who you hated most out of West Coast and Melbourne and who you wanted the damage done to. That was the only interest in it for me.
Yeah, that's fair call.
See, I was in the end, I was half barracking for West Coast because I reckon they've got the best chance of beating Port. And
I reckon they do too.
Yeah, no, definitely. But then also my Mrs. Pete was for her. She's had so much emotional scarring over the years from West Coast, stretching back to the 06 prelim, that she wants death to anything West Coast. She hates them with a passion, and would want to see them kicked out. So that was really what was going on in our house.
See, McHatin's pretty confident of Port beating West Coast on the weekend, but I didn't get a chance to remind him that they've never actually beaten West Coast at Adelaide Oval.
Never.
0-3.
No, 0-3, and so that was what I was looking at.
0-4.
No, that's what it'll hopefully be after next Saturday night. I think the reason why West Coast play that ground very well is it's a very similar shape to Subiaco, so their game plan works on it. And it's the same thing why Sydney actually plays quite well here as well, and I was thinking back to that time where you actually had, it was Sydney, us and West Coast, where the three teams that kind of would beat each other. And I think it was the game plans worked quite well, but it's also because the grounds were very similar.
It's a very good point, Nikki, and Subiaco, of course, is longer, but it's very narrow, and Adelaide Oval is very much the same. It's narrow when you compare it to, say, to the MCG, etc. And the West Coast, they have what they call their web, and it works well across our ground as it does at their ground. And that's also one of the reasons why they don't perform very well in Melbourne, because the grounds are wider.
Hang on, when it was the love triangle between Sydney, West Coast and us, weren't we playing
We
at
were
Footy
at Footy
Park?
Park. Yeah, I mean, that was a bit wider, and so that was kind of a bit odd.
That was
But it
bunkum,
wasn't as
Nikki.
wide.
Bunkum.
No, but it wasn't
Bunkum
as
it
wide
was,
as
bunkum.
the MCG.
Bunkum.
So I thought. I mean, the only interest in the end was who you shafted, and it was nice to be in that position. You could, you shaft someone. I kind of like Melbourne being shafted in a way, because I thought they were pretty hot, stuff after they beat us this year. But that was it, really. I didn't think that, other than that, there was much interest in the game. I didn't really.
Did you like the Crouch boys getting the record?
Oh yeah, I suppose. I thought it was. Didn't really do that much for me.
Those two actually played quite well.
I quite like, having just bagged him, I quite like Seasman's game.
I
think he carried for something like 600 odd metres.
Yeah, team high.
So that's not a bad performance.
So Pete, do you reckon Atkins needs to get dropped on that performance and Seed stays in?
I don't, and I'm not saying this. I'm well past the point of being a flag waving Atkins fan. He's just another player now that he's actually in the side. But
Well, thank God for that. I thought you were going to have sex with him at one stage.
No, that was just from the point of view that I thought he should get it. He'll make it. That was a prediction that he'll make it, which I think he kind of has. But he might play 50 games. But no, I think that he had an excellent game against Essendon. I don't think they'll put too much.
Hasn't been good apart from that for 6 weeks, Pete. I don't reckon.
Yeah, maybe, but I think he's had a good enough year. I don't think they'll drop him. I think they'd be more likely to drop Miller than him.
Yeah, well, that's true.
Yeah, but Miller has to come out because you've got Walker and Talia to come back in. So that means if
and Greenwood.
and Greenwood to come back in. So if Seedsman is going to stay in, and he put his hand up nicely, he did everything he was supposed to do. That means somebody like Atkins or Charlie.
Yeah, what do you think about Charlie? I don't think it's D-Mac. What do you reckon about Charlie, Pete?
No, I still think he'll be retained just because he's got that. I think that what will stick in selectors' minds will be his performances in finals last year. I think that he showed that under that kind of intensity that he can perform. He's got the capacity to do something explosive. So I think they'll carry him for the finals. I don't think they'll get rid of him.
Yeah, there were actually 3 players that came into the side, and they're really on trial to see whether they can force their way into the team. Hartigan, of course, recovering from injury. Seedsman also recovering from long-term injury, and Miller, who's been in and out the side. And I think that 2 of those players, Hartigan and Seedsman, Hartigan, I think, made a very good case that he will stay and Keith will go. Seedsman, I think, made a very good case why he should stay. And then you've got to target where would you put him. And Pete, it's going to be really a choice between Seedsman and Atkins, in my opinion.
I don't know. I think that I think Miller will drop straight back out.
That's for Greenwood. Greenwood comes in.
Greenwood comes in, yeah. No, look, I'm sticking with. I think they'll go with their proven formula. I think that Pike's pretty set in his ways. I think they'll stick with the proven formula. I think Seed might unluckily go straight back out.
I think you're probably right. If it was mine, I haven't been very happy with Atkins for some time, and I probably would debate the change because he did get a lot of carrying yardage, Seedsman, and he's a very direct player in contrast to Atkins, who's really got himself running around in circles at the moment. And that's if Atkins plays a direct game, he can be a very damaging player. And I would like to see him just get back to that. But for the last few weeks, he hasn't been.
So all in all, Peter, nothing game on the weekend, which is what Nicky and I thought and what Macca eventually thought once he got his head around it. And I guess the bye week means that momentum really doesn't mean as much as it would have done in previous years.
That's the thing where I did change my mind when I looked at it in that context. Whereas normally you like to go charging into the next game with all these wins behind you. Well, that didn't work last year when the Bulldogs got kicked off the park in the last minor round game of the year and then come out and won the flag.
Exactly. Well, I reckon Pete might have gone.
No.
Right, still here.
I'm still here. I'm just letting you guys go on for a bit.
No, poor old...
He talks too much before.
Poor old Pete's stunned because we've been talking about we're talking about the possibility of Atkins going out.
No. Look, I think that I reckon he's, he would certainly be under the pump. I mean, he hasn't been in great form. I just really don't believe that they're going to make all sorts of decisions based upon that game on Sunday because I just don't think that they were at full kit.
They will win. Hartigan will come in, I'm sure of that. I think he'll take the place of Keith.
Yeah, you may well be right there, Macca, but I think that was,
I think that's purely on the matchup. Well, we're playing GWS, and they've got Patton and Cameron.
And I think that he's really Hartigan is a first 22 player anyway, so it's sort of a natural evolution that he would eventually come back in.
Correct.
So done and done.
So should we move on to the Cockwomble?
Come on, Pete.
Yes, let's go Cockwomble. I've got a Cockwomble that I really want to get off my chest.
Hang on. I got music, but just start talking.
Oh, I like to listen to that theme song. I sit here and, month along quite happily. So, oh well. So, shall we start with Melbourne? So, not only did they put up a banner on their website that they're going to play finals after they beat Brisbane. Whoops. They also sent an email out to all of their supporters on Friday to talk about the possibility of them playing finals and what they'd need to do. Don't count your chickens before they hatch, you dipshits. Which then meant they had to turn up on Monday and get their president and their captain to front the media to apologise to their members.
Well, not only that, apparently they were sledging St Kilda about what they were going to be doing in September, which I find unbelievable.
Should be
Oh, dear Lord.
They should be apologising to their members because they missed their snow booking this year.
Yeah, I know, they made them actually stay in Melbourne for once. But I also think it's quite amusing the fact that on the Melbourne Big Footy board, their game day thread on the West Coast Adelaide game was more involved and longer than the one on the Adelaide board.
Yeah, well, that doesn't surprise me. They had a lot riding on it, but they were stupid to actually let it come to that. They should have just beaten Collingwood.
Well, I think somebody pointed out all they had to do was score 10 more points during the year and they would have had enough percentage.
Yeah, only themselves to blame. Definitely, like that whole club put in a cockwomble of a week. I mean, the performance on the ground, the stuff that you pointed out, Nicky, them sledging, the whole thing. I mean, what a disaster for Melbourne.
But I think who beats them ever so easily is once again the AFL. So last week, the head of the umpiring department, we discovered, didn't know how distance worked. Well, this week, they proved the AFL once again, they don't know how colours work. So Friday night, you have a team that plays in blue against a team that plays in poo and wee colours. They put the umpires in a pale blue.
Yeah, it was ridiculous.
It was the stupidest thing ever. In our game, I kept seeing, because they had the long camera thing, and you'd see one of the umpires and go, oh, that's one of our players, because we're in white. So if you had the predominantly white Clash Guernsey on, which the AFL wants teams to play in, the pale baby powder blue looked too freaking close to it. It was ridiculous.
Well, it even didn't work for our game against West Coast. I mean, it was so pale that, you know, the white of our jumper made it very difficult. PJ in the chat brings up a good one. Mark Stevens from Channel 7 was sent over to Auckland, flew over with Dustin Martin after having doorstopped him at the airport, flew over to Auckland to follow the Dustin Martin... Auckland?
Are you doing your Kiwi accent?
Why does it need to be Auckland?
Because that's actually how it's said.
That's how you say it. I'm saying Auckland.
Okay.
Right? What? That's it, you're banned. Like, what were Channel 7 hoping to achieve by sending Stevens over there? Did they think that Dusty was going to meet with his old man and then go back to Steve-O and say, oh, now I've got the scoop for you, but don't tell anyone? How freaking ridiculous.
Well, I saw that, and I totally agree with you, Phoenix. And, I mean, that is cockwomble worthy, actually.
Yeah, Mark Stevens is the definition of a cockwomble.
Yeah, but that's not bloody Stevens. He is a cockwomble, but that's Channel bloody 7.
Yeah, they're just a tabloid.
I mean, he's got a free trip over to Auckland, but I mean, Auckland and and Dustin Martin, he just ignored him. He didn't even acknowledge his existence. So it was just an absolute waste of a time. Lovely place to go though.
Where, Auckland?
Been there many times. One of my favourites is Auckland.
All right, Pete, what's yours?
Again, for me, is the media, and particularly Victorian media, which irritate the shit out of me. Although it was a Victorian issue, which I think that the cockwomble should go to in something that Luke Darcy was probably one of our favourites, one of our favourite absolute dickheads.
I disown him from being a South Adelaide player.
He's an absolute shocker, and the comment that he made was in respect to Nick Riewold's request, which was made after the game that Jack participate in helping chair him off the field, which was a nice touch. And so Luke Darcy has then gone on and had a crack at Jack Riewoldt that he should be staying out of St Kilda affairs, that the retirement of Nick Riewoldt was a St Kilda matter, and that he really had no business in cheering his cousin off the ground. I just think that what a dickhead. What an absolute prime dickhead.
There's been a bit of backlash about that. I can't see the problem.
Well,
yeah, I'm sorry.
If it was anyone other than Luke Darcy as well, then lump them all in as being cockwombles.
Yeah, Brayshaw and Billy Brownless yesterday were going on about it, and they said the same kind of thing. It was the St Kilda thing. I don't know what. I saw the picture. Why was he doing it? Well, hang on. Isn't being chaired off? That's an honour, but you also sometimes get to say, I would like these players to cheer me off. These guys are my mates. Because that's what often we look at to see who cheers them off. There's a particular meaning to it. So I bet probably Nick actually asked Jack.
Yeah, he did.
Well,
that's the thing. He sent someone over to Richmond at the end of the game to ask if Jack would come across and help.
Well, then that makes it even more stupid. I've got another nomination as well, and that's the Fremantle Football Club. You would have seen vision of pudgy little supporter for Fremantle trying to do a high five with the players as they went past, and every one of them totally ignored the poor little bugger whose face got more despondent and more despondent. Mothers trying to attract attention, and I see that Fife has come out and apologised on behalf of the club, but all I'd say, that was very poor form for Fremantle. You're bloody hopeless on the football field and you're hopeless when you're not playing as well. Poor form.
I think Fife actually ended up getting in touch with that young lad, but you're right. He was the only one there.
Yeah, it did actually lead to something quite nice in the McGovern re-signing thread, where you actually had that picture of the kid. Somebody actually put an arrow to him and said Freo, and then pointed off the screen and went McGovern.
Pudgy little fella, but you got to feel sorry for him.
Who's the winner, Nikki?
Oh, this is actually hard. There's some absolute doozies this week. I mean, my favourite is always the AFL. Just purely because their incompetence knows no bound, and it's just stupid. And it affected pretty much every game.
How about Port signing Sam Gray on for 17 years or something?
Who? Oh yeah, that guy plays up forward. He's okay. No, I kind of think I'm edging towards. I mean, I hate Mark Stevens and I hate Channel 7 with a passion because they're just gutter snipes and television. But I actually think we're going to go. We'll give Pete this. The rest of his discussion was stupid.
Bunkum.
But I know. But the rest of his discussion was bunkum. But we're going to give him the cockwobble because I think those idiots in the media and those ex-players who were deigning to make a decision on, how Nick should have been cheered off. It was Nick's freaking decision, and he wanted his cousin. And anytime you've actually seen, particularly those Maddie games, and the way that the two interact, they're quite close cousins. They are Tasmanian after all. But it's just a really lovely touch from that family. And how much it actually means to the both of them. And I thought it was a really lovely thing when I saw it. So those guys, just ridiculous. They are cockwombles. So James Brayshaw, Damien Barrett, I know he was one who went on about it as well. Billy Brownless, but he's just a cockwomble every time he opens his mouth. Or actually, anytime he just stands there. But, yeah. And Luke Darcy, he has disgraced the name of South Adelaide player, and I thank God that he keeps trying to pretend he's a Victorian.
Yeah, you got one, Pete.
I think Pete's nodded off because it is quite late.
I've had a win. I've had one win tonight, even though in my own mind I've had a few wins. I can at least claim this as an objective win. All right.
We had enough.
We're only 20 minutes over, and I'm just loving it. And I'm just going crazy tonight. I'm just. It's finals time.
People in the chat. Two more to get to 500.
It's all about footy tonight, and it's just all about letting it all hang out tonight, not worrying about the time because it is finals time. we've had a great re-signing in Mitch McLovin today. It's just it's a great time to be around footy and talking footy, I think, at this time of the year.
Certainly
the real
is.
season starts now.
The real season starts now, and I think we've got enough. I think we can get over GWS next Thursday. We'll have another Tuesday Night Live between now and then. But I really think that we can get over GWS. I think we've got the firepower there, and win our way to a prelim final. Hey, one quick thing I was just going to ask: did everyone get their tickets, and did everyone have any problems with the ticketing today?
Well, I didn't do it. The family did.
Yeah, no, my son was doing it, so I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not going, so...
well, there you
me,
go. I hopped on the phone. It took me about 10 minutes, and I got exactly the seats that I wanted. So it all seemed like a pretty easy process to me.
Yeah, but they like you, Pete.
They do.
Somebody
They
has
do.
to.
Well, there must have been some problems with the Port game because they didn't sell that many tickets. So did the site crash for them, or?
I think there must have been a system malfunction because almost 13,000 tickets left. I'm sure that they'll be all snapped up by about 9:30 tomorrow.
Well, they should, because they only are going to play one final this year.
Oh, Jesus. I wonder if 19's still there.
He's there.
Dear.
He's there.
All right, so look, we'll probably think about wrapping that up. Hopefully the guys have got their 500 posts on the chat.
They have.
Yeah, beautiful. And all right, we'll wrap that up, everybody. Another Tuesday Night Live AFL Crowcast. It's been wonderful to bring it to you. So much to talk about. Such a good time to be talking about footy and getting stuck into it. Good to have lots of discussions as always. Nikki, Macca and Phoenix, thanks so much for your participation tonight. Any saved rounds?
Well, I've got a few saved rounds about what's coming up, Pete.
Yes, please do.
As well as obviously reminding people to follow us on Facebook and Twitter at AFL Crowcast. You can also give us a review and a couple of stars on iTunes if that's how you look at us, if that's how you listen to us, I should say. Not only that, but we have a special pre-finals edition. It's not actually a Crowcast, although I'll be hosting it, so it will be live on the Crowcast channel. But it'll be myself, Macca and Portia from the Port board, someone from the Richmond board, and someone from the Swans board, getting together and just having a chat about the upcoming final series. Unfortunately, the Geelong guy had to pull out, but that should be a good listen as well. So for those that are interested in hearing a few different voices talk about the upcoming final series, keep an eye on the Big Footy boards for times and Twitter. And of course, if you're using the app or the website, it should flick you a notification as well. But I think it's going to be between 8 and 8:30-ish Adelaide time. So just keep an eye out for the times there. But that should be a lot of fun. And then obviously no Thursday night cast, no Sunday night cast. And then we'll be back on Tuesday next week for our preview, I would imagine.
All right, thanks, Fiend, and thanks for listening, everybody. Wonderful to have you all with us on this extended version of a Tuesday Night Live and the AFL Crowcast.
It's only extended if you're not involved.
Exactly. Great to have you all with us. Thanks for joining us, and we'll look forward to having you all back with us again next Tuesday night for another edition of the AFL Crowcast Tuesday Night Live.
See you
guys.
Tuesday.
No.